Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Coalition Revisited. Last time we did Baltic Front, and if I checked correctly, the only two coalitions left are Blue Dragons and Eurocorps. After that, I guess I might as well do, oh yeah, Soviets as well. I have completely forgot Soviets. Soviets, Eurocorps, Blue Dragons. And then once I'm done with these, I might as well also go over like Red 4 unspec decks. I know you want to see more Red 4 unspec. You can't wait to see more of these. But also Blue 4. And I don't mean unspec, I mean like, or just unspec, but obviously also, especially for Blue 4, mechanized and motorized, which are probably the most prevalent decks. And even for Red 4, most of the time you see mech if you talk about Red 4 unspec. But today, as you saw in the title, probably we're gonna go over Blue Dragons. Blue Dragons in general is in a weird spot. They're by no means bad. They just have some noticeable gaps that, however, they have some I wouldn't call them unicorn units, but powerful, unique-ish units. It's a bit hard to describe, but they're by no means bad, and they are probably how a coalition ideally should be. They don't have any like straight up complete gaps, like let's say, I don't know, like Yugoslavia that has literally no seaplane, stuff like that. Or Scandinavia not really having a proper heavy tank or super heavy, just the 1-1, which is just in a weird, kind of spot that has to fill both. It has certainly weaknesses, and we'll get to those. But it also has its unique kind of, I wouldn't say unique playstyle, but its strengths to make up for that. I'll explain more what I exactly mean with that. But let's just go over the tabs and talk about that. First of all, this is honestly one of my favorite cities up until it got completely power creeped by the Achzarit. It was actually in a kind of unique position, for a relatively good price. You got 2 top armor, good speed, Browning to defend itself, but nowadays you got the Achzarit. Before that, it was in a unique-ish spot, especially before tank CVs got price buffed, where you were able to get a decently armored when it comes to surviving artillery CV for pretty cheap. It should be noted, and you can see this in the armory, due to the availability bonus, you get 4 infantry CVs per card, as well as 5 of these, which have usually a 4 base availability, whereas infantry has 3. And usually, especially when you don't have an availability bonus, 3 cards of infantry and 4 of these with 7 CVs total is, I'd say personally, for me, is just the threshold where it's where I'm like, for 1 versus 1 decks, where I'm like, that's enough CVs, but probably in most other decks where I would have only 7 CVs, it probably wouldn't be enough for me personally. But thanks to the availability bonus, you get 1 extra for each, and that's actually really nice, and in my opinion also quite noticeable and worth pointing out. Also, I should definitely, before I forget that, turn on the audio that I put up for the MI24 meme-ish video. Infantry CV, nothing special. Unfortunately, you don't really get the best transports. You get the KM900, which is okay for ground, but you get only the basic Hueys. You don't get anything along the lines of a Lynx H7 or even K29, but also you don't get anything along those lines of a basic Lynx H1, right? Just fast, even if it doesn't have any proper weapons, fast and 6 HP would be nice. But the UH1s, they're just, not the greatest transports, but, it's not the biggest of deals. No noteworthy Jeep CVs. This one does have 10 HP and the same availability, but unlike the Humvee of USA, it doesn't have a Browning, and it's also a bit slower. Does have a bit more autonomy, but I'd say not having the Browning is actually quite a big disadvantage. But like you saw in my deck, I just ran 1 card of infantry and 1 card of the K277. Personally, I don't think this tank CV is worth it at all. Only 1 top armor, 1 back armor, It's not honestly not too hard to kill this with artillery or bombers, and the pretty bad off-road speed also makes it harder to evade. So personally, I'd just go for this. You also get 4 of these per card. Sorry, 5. And of the tank CV, you only get 4, including the availability bonus. Same with this one, bad armor, pretty bad speed. It is a bit smaller, which, against, if the enemy gets line of sight and has a direct weapon shooting at it, can be nice. And the gun is actually usable. Still, I'd personally go for this one. But if you want to go for tank CV, or you are like, I want it to be able to defend itself, even if it's like just a KT, then go for the Nanion Chiki. Like for 5 points more, you get an actually usable gun. You're also a bit faster, and just generally are more survivable. For 5 points on a unit that you can't get more of 4 of, that's 20 points over a whole game. That is, if you even buy all of them, that's worth the 5 points. But like I said, I'd go for this one. Supply trucks are another issue. You get bad supply helos, and the only supply trucks you get are 10 and 15 points. 15 is still okay, but I think ideally you want at least 20 or maybe even 30. Another worst thing, if you run a fob, it's not a huge deal. If you don't run a fob, it can be a bit annoying, at least for me. And if you use a lot of Chumats, you will probably want to run a fob. Speaking of Chumats are, besides Spike, the best ATGM in the game, most likely. You could argue that the extra range on Conqueror's M on top of the extra 8 AP or the 26 AP on a Milan 3 might be better. In some circumstances it is, in some it isn't. Personally, I think that the extra speed and accuracy are worth a lot more. But I wouldn't really blame you if you said the Milan F3 especially is better. It's up to you. I'd say that Chumat is better, but yeah. It has nearly the same speed stats as the Spike. It is a tiny bit slower. I think it has a tiny bit lower maximum speed, if I remember correctly. But for all intents and purposes, it is just as fast. It's a bit less accurate, but it's just very good. And you can get 2 cars of it. So especially in mixed mechanized, it's not rare to see them taking 2 cards of Chumat. In an unspec deck, it's hard to fit in unless you are playing like in a team game and you have a certain type of role, or you know exactly on what part of the map you're playing, etc. Then of course you can fit it in. Usually not so much. Gongbyung. They have an incredible HE output because the Flash has a burst length of 3 or 4 shots even, meaning they shoot 3 or even 4 times 4 HE before having to reload. So they shoot 4 HE, reload for like a second, shoot again, do this 3 times, and then they have to reload for like 10 seconds or something. Incredible HE output, but like most Flamer squads, for one, very niche. A simple 5-pointer can really incapacitate them already and kill them. The other issue is they have only 5 HP, meaning that direct and indirect fire support is even more deadly. And you can't really use them as, which is very often a role that infantry has to fill. They can't tank for your fire support, your tanks, or your other units. And that makes them just very, very, very niche. Even in a mech deck, they're just not worth it, because then your infantry becomes so much better and you have so much fire support, cheap and efficient, that there's also still no real role for them. Again, unless if you will have to fight a lot of infantry in a forest or something before the game begins, there might be a point in putting them in. Like I said, they have an incredible HE output, but they require a lot of micro, and they're pretty easy to counter for most decks. So yeah. Base Hyping are just straight up bad. Basic MG, basic rifle, M72 law for 25 points, which is absolutely horrible. Like, they really don't use them at all. Hyping 90, on the other hand, are pretty good. They got a mini-me set clone, they got a Panzerfaust 3, one of the best anti-tank weapons in the game. Still a slightly above average rifle. It has a better stabilizer and gets a CQC bonus, if I'm not wrong. They're just very, very solid. 15 HP makes them a lot more a lot stronger, especially in forests when you have to deal with vehicles, because they obviously don't die as fast, but they are also kind of expensive, and their transports both have only 1 armor. You don't want to take them in the Huey. I'd say take them in the KM900. They're, like I said, a bit expensive, so try to keep them alive and repair them when they're down to like 3-4 HP. Retreat with them. Yeah, they're not amazing, but they're just very, very solid, very good. Hudo Ren, they're a bit like a Perota. They're very nice for like defending towns or defending flanks where you don't expect very heavy vehicles, you know, stuff like that. Dealing with IVs that are attacking a town, they're very good for defending that. Not much else really. They're kind of cheap, and I like to take them with the WAPC to bolster their anti-infantry capability. You know, grenade launcher, 2 armor, just shits on infantry. Since the Hudo Ren themselves can somewhat efficiently deal with like IVs. So if you take that pack of 2, you know, they basically always need 2 shots to kill most IVs, unless they have only 1 armor, or they have 6 armor. Then they'd need 3 shots, assuming they hit, of course. But they also get a good amount of ammo. Yeah, defensively they're great. They're not very good at CQC because they have a battle rifle, which gets a what's the opposite of a bonus? A malus? Is it they get a penalty. That's what I'm looking for. A penalty for shooting in CQC with their primary weapon. So be careful with that. Mistral, it's literally a Mistral. 5 HP, so it also costs a bit more than something like a Stinger, you know, but just very accurate, good range. Hard to fit in an unspec deck, but again, if you have them in your deck, you're most likely not gonna be like, oh, such a useless unit. Manpads, unless they're like Red Eyes or something, they're never really mandatory, and in an unspec deck, they're hard to fit in. But at the same time, if you have them, they're never gonna be useless, unless your opponent literally doesn't use any planes or helicopters, of course. Red Eye are just useless. Stinger, you know, just if you want, they're also very fine. You know, they're just cheap as fuck, especially in a 5-pointer, 20 points per pop. You know, just spread them around, and they're just gonna shoot down shit. You know, if you want the Manpad, Stinger, or Mistral, they're both perfectly fine. They're basically in a very similar to just the Hudo Ren, these fist squads. Obviously, they have HE rounds on an anti-tank weapon, but they only have 5 HP. They're significantly slower. They have no MG. They have bitless rounds, so they're even more defensive focused. Yeah, don't try to be like very offensive with them. They do come with the KFV line. Both are nice. You know, if you want a grenade launcher, you can also go for a grenade launcher. Not really that great in my opinion, because if you want the recoilless rifle, you just go for Hudo Ren, and if you want the KFVs, you go for the Sojong Su, the line infantry, much higher availability and also cheaper. So honestly, not really the best choice. The main issue with these recoilless rifle fist squads is they don't get a rate of fire bonus on their anti-tank weapon. If you compare them to, again, Hudo Ren, they have the same, you know, rate of fire on their anti-tank weapon, right? Even though they're fist squads, which usually get the bonus. If you take a look at, for example, Deckungsgruppe, you know, and compare their Carl Gustav with Livgarden. Livgarden, a normal squad, gets 10 RPM. Deckungsgruppe get a 50% rate of RPM boost, or whatever. Maybe it's like actually more. You get the point, right? They have a 4-second reload time. Livgarden have a 6-second reload time. You know, that's a massive boost. But the recoilless rifle fist squads, they don't get a boost at all, which is the main reason why they're just not very good most of the time. Sometimes they are, you know, but they're just, yeah. Base Kute, this is a bug. You know, they have the same primary weapon stats as, let's say, Jägere. You know, they just the unit card just displays the CQC weapon. In CQC, the weapon stats just on SMGs just become twice the accuracy. You know, so they have the same SMG here, but they're just not worth it. They have a basic MG and the base law. In Blue Dragons, not really worth it. In CQC, they can absolutely murder infantry. But it's the other issue is just the transport. The only ground transport to keep them relatively cheap is the HMV with no armor and only the 7.62mm MG, so it's not gonna do much. So yeah, if you want an infantry specifically for town fighting and nothing else, they're an okay choice. Outside of that, not so much. And the way Blue Dragon's infantry often looks, there's also just no way to fit them in. Gute 90. They get a mini missile, an actually good MG, and a decent anti-tank weapon, but they don't have a SMG anymore. So I don't think they would be quite as effective in CQC, even though they have a better MG. But they're just a lot more all around. Even though that's not even a proper English sentence, but you get the point. A lot more versatile, I guess, is what I'm looking for. They're still very, very good against in CQC, don't get me wrong. They will win against anything that isn't a special force in CQC. So Gute and Andy are probably the better choice because they're just also more versatile. They also get the WAPC as well, if you want to use that. And same issue as there is with the Hwagiban, Jigsaw Hwagiban. I probably butchered that. However, they do get the Hachikyuu Shiki, which is a solid IFV. It's not really great, it has a decent autocannon. It has a AGM that isn't really useful or that consistent, I guess. It's kind of useful, it has okay range and 17 AP. It's not gonna do much against medium tanks or anything, but it's gonna potentially kill IFVs or maybe AA if it's running away. In an unspec deck, probably not gonna fit in. However, in a mech deck, Blue Dragon's mech, if you had to run that, might be fine. I think Putin even runs this in blue 4 mech. Not the worst combination by any means. So yeah, you can again get the Hachikyuu Shiki with line infantry, but the line infantry that comes with this IFV costs 15 points. We don't save, and line infantry itself is not that great. And especially if you're running mech, then this kind of combination is kind of unique. You get these hunts, which sometimes you may even want them with the range. So it's an okay combination. Again, another manpad, also very useful. It's like a Stinger C, but you get 10% extra accuracy, but it also costs 5 points more. You have 3 solid in a manpad choices in Blue Dragons if you want a manpad. And transports, however, are not great. HMV, again, not that big, not that great. I mean, on a manpad squad, that's not a big deal because you don't really want them to be directly at the front line, and you buy one squad here and there, so it's not a big issue. Nana Sanshiki, the same thing. So Chungsu, it's literally line infantry, but it should also be your main infantry if you played with dragons. Mainly the 85s because they get a KFV line, especially KFV 25. It's just very solid, very good IFV, good HE output, good AP output against other IFVs. Great. You also get a good 5-pointer with 2 MGs, 2 front armor, 2 side armor, 70 KMH off-road, 35 KMH amphibious. You get a good 5-pointer, you get a good IFV, what more do you want? And the 10-point infantry, without a price penalty gets 16 AP, 20 RPM. Very good infantry. Another Stinger squad. These, again, are not really worth taking. If you want the Hachikyuu Shiki and you want an infantry squad with 10 HP, then you can get them with the, So Shu Buntai 90. I again butchered the name, but yeah, that's the only reason to take them really. You could get them if you want a cheap WAPC with 10 main infantry, I suppose, but not the greatest combination in my opinion. UTC Seal, no reason to take them. Unless, I suppose, you definitely want a fast infantry to drop behind the enemy lines because they come in a Blackhawk, which is fast and has 6 HP. But you also get the Tokionsa and the Reconcept within the same helicopter, and the Tokionsa also get a Minimi as an MG. So, Ibegun, those are your service. They get also the access to the K200, which is a very good 5-point transport. So, again, most certainly worth taking if you're looking for that. Support. Alright. These are just not worth taking at all. 5 HE only. Keep in mind, however, that the 5 HE on actually howitzers is a bigger 5 HE than the one you see on mortars. still not worth taking. Same with this one. This is just your M110 if you like M110s. MLRS is garbage. Mortars. This MLRS is also garbage. More mortars. No, I don't think I need to tell you anything about mortars. You nearly always want a mortar. Personally, I prefer the 4 or 5 HE ones. 3 HE is also still very usable. Canine Thunder. It's slightly worse Cesar stats-wise. No, worse AS90 stats-wise, I believe. It fires 3-round bursts with like a 5-second shot reload, if I remember correctly. It's fine. It's not great, but it's certainly not garbage. Basic iHawk, as like 10 other nations have. Avenger on steroids with a bit more range than the Stinger C, like the PSAM, which I forgot to mention. It doesn't only have it doesn't have extra accuracy, it has extra range. Sorry. Same with the PSAM squad, by the way. Sorry, I misspoke when I said that. Stinger C also has 70% accuracy, but the Stinger C has less range. It is if a plane gets into range, it gets absolutely demolished, but the range and no armor means that it can very easily get countered by rocket pods, especially. So if you're using it, be very careful. It is certainly a strong AA unit, but it is very, very squishy. So not bad by any means, but you have to be careful with that. You also have to get close. A very cheap-ish M110, 60 points only, but it's a lot less accurate. Another M110 here. I don't think I need to say anything about M110s, this is another radarless, what is it called? The US tab, I forgot. Vulcan, right, Vulcan. Same unit, same with the pivots. You also get the pivots, which is a very good unit. Pivots, the K263 and the Machbet, the only specs in the game that have a 0.2 second aim time. Every other spec has a 1 second aim time. That goes for both plane as well as helicopter and ground units. Pivots, K263 and Machbet, the only ones with the 0.2 seconds aim time. And that's very huge. Especially against planes, because it allows them to get shots off a lot earlier and longer, of course, thanks to that. So that's actually a huge, huge deal. And of course, if you were to suddenly have to shoot at ground units, you also shoot a lot faster. Sometimes if the infantry takes too long to aim or align, whatever, you can stun them before they even get a shot off. There's obviously no guarantee for that, but sometimes that can save your life. Same with tanks or something if they should suddenly appear in front of it. So very strong AAPs. Also cheap. Obviously it doesn't have the range, but it is really, really good. Even has 2 front armor. Does the pivots also have 2 front armor? No. Wow, it's actually... wow, it's even faster. It has a bit less autonomy, but it's just a straight up better pivots. Huh. I didn't even know that. Front armor is actually quite a big deal, especially against autocannon vehicles. Anyways, Biho, solid spec. Yeah, it's just a solid spec. Gun tank is also solid, has only 300 kmh kilometers autonomy, and is also kind of slow off-road. The gun tank, I believe, has a somewhat higher rate of fire, even though it does not say so on the unit card. Yeah, they're both solid, but unless you definitely want the extra range on the spec, I'd always go for this one. This is just useless. More hawks, short arrow, your only proper long, long range anti-helo AA unit. Definitely worth taking. Is also fine for Ghent. Can be a bit inconsistent sometimes, but definitely worth using. And safer to use than a closed arrow as well. Tanks. K1 should be basically your main tank. It's like an M1 IP, but the extra range on the gun. And I believe it has 1 more AP, right? It's just very, very good medium tank, all-round medium tank. It is survivable, it is fast, it has 2 MGs, 9 RPM, good accuracy, good stabilizers. There's nothing to complain about this tank. It's just very solid. Just keep in mind that 16 AP compared to like a Wilk M84A is a bit low, but obviously you get much more armor. So just be aware of that. K1A1 is not really great. 18 armor means that 26 AP heat will two-shot it, which is long, like Hellfires, Bombars, Milan F3, most notably. And just in general, that means that heat weapons like anti-tank missiles, even on planes, will basically do a lot more damage. So if it's even on like 7 or 8 HP, a single 30 AP missile will already kill it. So just be aware of that. Yeah, it's not a horrible tank by any means, but it's mostly used just to bolster or to just get more heavy tanks in case you run out of Kyumarus. Really, that's the only reason to take it most of the time. Kyumaru, very, very solid. Again, compared to other super heavies, kind of low armor, so be careful with that, especially if you go up at close range against other medium tanks. They can really do a lot of damage to you. Same with infantry, they do more damage to the Kyumaru than they most of the time than they do to other super heavies. But obviously you get the 12 RPM, 23 AP, massive damage output. Against every tank that isn't like a Leclerc or Kyumaru itself, you will always, or 103, STRP 103, you will basically always get a second shot of first. So yeah, it just needs even more micro than other super heavies, but definitely worth using. And obviously you get 2 cards of that. In Japan National, you get 3 per card, by the way. M41A1, if you watch my videos, you already know this tank. Very good fire support. Obviously has bad autonomy, but if you have the space, definitely worth using. M84s, the whole line is not really great. I mean, this one has 17 AP for 45 points and good range. You know, it's like a kind of a meme unit. But outside of the K1 and you know, the only other tank outside of Kyumaru K1, K1A1, and you know, M41A1, if you want to call that a tank, it's really the Nanonshiki E or G. They have a ridiculously high DPS. They have, similarly to the AMX 13, they have kind of a revolver autoloader type of thing, where they shoot like, I believe 4 it is for the Nanonshikis. They shoot 4 shots in a very quick succession, then have to reload for longer. So they're not like, they don't have the same rate of fire as Leopard 1s. Leopard 1, you know, shoots and reloads 6 seconds, shoots, reloads 6 seconds, right? Nanonyoshiki does not. It shoots, reloads for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then shoots again, and that like 4 times, and then it has to reload for like 12 seconds or something. So be aware of that, but very high DPS. Nanonyoshiki G comes with the grenade launcher, makes it really deadly against infantry, but it's still only 8 armor, so be aware of that. And the Nanonyoshikis have poor off-road speed, poor optics, poor rear armor, poor top armor, poor side armor, poor armor in general. Which is why I don't really think the grenade launcher most of the time will do a lot of work. But if you micro it properly and if you're very careful, it obviously can. It just will need infantry and cheap vehicles and something in front to tank for it. But both are just fine, very good. I prefer the E version, but it's just 10 points. You also get 1 more AP, and the armor obviously helps against other tanks, you know, so it's not by any means a horrible upgrade. This one, I guess, you could use instead of the M41 if you want like very good armor for 15 points. Also horrible autonomy, but also horrible off-road speed. Which means that the low autonomy will be even more noticeable because nearly always will your tank just driving towards the front line will also take a part of the route off-road, or will have to take a longer road way, you know, because the low off-road speed means it will prefer roads over driving off-road. So the low autonomy will be even more noticeable, and the high fuel means that it is actually more supply intensive to refuel that to get it more to the front line. So it's not really that great. But on a small map or something, it's by no means bad. You know, don't get me wrong. Still 8 RPM, and it has 3 HE compared to 2. Still got an M2 Browning. So really not horrible, honestly. It's just even more noticeable with the autonomy. Alchinano Shiki. Yeah, again, I don't think I need to tell you, but it's just very solid recon infantry. Good for base defense, good for openers, good for flanks, good for fire support. It's fast. It has 2 armor. There's not much more you can want. Your only shock infantry, if you want shock infantry, it's one of the, if not the worst shock infantry, or recon infantry, I should say, in the game. But it has 10 HP, it has decent infantry DPS, you know, just horrible versus vehicles. Transports are okay. You got the WAPC, the helicopters are pretty bad, and the other transports are also not great. I mean, I guess you get a 5-point truck like every other infantry as well, recon infantry, but Fiat is just bad. It can't fire the RH202 and the MK19 at the same time. It can only fire one of these. And it also costs 45 points, which with only 2 armors, so don't use it, okay? AFV90 is just your cheap recon tank, even though it doesn't really look like a tank. It's like a tank turret on top of the K200 or whatever or on top of the KFV or on top of something. I myself don't have the space to put it in, but I know that others really like it, so it's by no means bad. It doesn't have a stabilizer, so be aware of that. But good range, good accuracy, decent AP, not the greatest rate of fire, and only 2 front armor, but it's also only 30 points, so not really worth using these two. OH-60 if you want your cheap recon helicopter, very useful, you know, similar to the Gazelle cannon or the Hera. Ninja, now it is one of the 3 recon helicopters together with the Tiger and the KA-52. It has medium stealth or even good. No, it has the same stealth as the Tiger, both good, and the KA-52 has medium stealth. Yeah. So the main role of this is sometimes, I guess, you know, in the team game, it is not too expensive, so you can use it as an opener simply for scouting and obviously escorting. But in a 1v1 and also in team games, but especially in 1v1, the main role for this is just to spot very from very far away, while also basically being invisible most of the time to your opponent, very hard to get rid of, and just bully your opponent with your peace pheasants, because you can spot the ground units from so far away, so deep into the forests, and especially if your opponent doesn't have something like Crotals, if it can even spot it as well at that range, very hard to get rid of if your opponent knows what he has to do. Your opponent being the one with a ninja, so especially on maps like Paddy Field, you know, that can be a real pain in the ass where you don't have a lot of cover to work with. So yeah, that can be really annoying with the stealth. At least it doesn't have ground weapons, so you know it can't fuck you up directly most of the time. So you know, in order for this unit to really mess with you and your units and just fuck up your whole plan, the opponent at least has to also have like peace pheasants and stuff like that. So on its own, it won't do too much, you know. It's more of a, you know, kind of expensive support unit, similar to the KA-52, unless, you know, you're trying to counter radar AA with that. Regular recon infantry, if you want that, you know, very cheap, still has very good stealth. I prefer this over stuff like BGS, because BGS only have good stealth, and that's a major difference. And then, like I said, the Tokionsa, if you want infantry to drop in helicopters, I'd go for these. You want to get 4 of them per card, or 5 in Blue Dragons, obviously, but amazing MG, carbine primary, and decent anti-tank weapon for 30 points, very good. Either in the UH-60, or if you want them in ground transport, K5111 or the KM900. Whatever you prefer, really. Vehicle tab, not much worth talking about, except for the M36, really. If you don't have the space for the M41A1 or the other cheap tank in the tank tab, which is understandable, in the vehicle tab you get this, which fills kind of the same role. It has bad off-road speed, but a bit more autonomy, you know, doesn't have an MG, but has 3 HE. Also has 2 front and side armor, which is important. Just a very solid fire support vehicle. Enzo is not great. It has a 2-round burst, but it only has 16 rounds. It has 1 armor, bad autonomy as well. It's not really worth using, trust me. M18, you know, it is faster and has bad autonomy, but it only has 1 armor, bad AP, bad range, so it's not that great either. Neither is this, really. Helicopters. Well, they mostly have Cobras, right? And these tower helicopters, but they're not great. Aito is honestly too bad, but for 50 points, yeah, it doesn't pack up enough punch. Most of the time you will probably be using the H1T to get Tau 2 and the H1J, or either of those cheap rocket pods with the Vulcan, meaning that even if you run out of rocket pods, the Vulcan is still a pretty good autocannon. So especially against light vehicles, stuff like that, very solid choice. H1S is basically the same as the T, except you get ITAUs. So for 10 points, it's definitely worth upgrading to get 5 extra AP and more accuracy. But if you have no other choice, it's still fine, because even after you use the ITAUs, you still have a lot of utility outside of the. You can still get a lot of utility out of this helicopter, I should say. Planes. This is a bit awkward again. Dragonfly is an absolute meme unit. I don't use this, but I just find it hilarious. It can, in theory, kill any plane. You just have to crit with 1 missile, and against 2 armor planes, you have to hit the side armor. I guess it can't kill the B5 or the Avia, but I think in theory, on some maps it might be possible, because sometimes planes just don't actually adjust their height towards for mountains. So sometimes they actually fly through, or just literally just a tiny bit above mountains. So I think if you would bomb there with those snake eyes, I think there is a theoretical possibility where you could, in theory again, kill even a B5. I might be wrong with that though, but I think there is a possibility. F1, Room Room. It's really not horrible, but ever since the laser guided bomb nerf, I think this is the plane that got hit by it the most, because it's just cheap, so you want more of them rather than a few, and you also need like 2 of them to actually kill a tank at full HP. So ever since then, it has really not seen a lot of use. It's still not bad, but I think most of the time you want other planes. It's a decent anti-helo hunter. Veterancy obviously bolsters the accuracy, and a low-ish speed, but not too low, means that it can get 2 missiles off in one run, almost certainly, massively increasing the consistency. And the Vulcan obviously helps a lot as well. F-15 Chase is garbage. Peace Bridge, expensive helo hunter. It's very fast, so often it's hard to get 2 missiles off, so I wouldn't really suggest using it. KF-16C, you get 2 of those on veteran. Very solid. Not the most consistent, because not having short range missiles means that you will only have like 3, or if you fly head on, or sometimes only or 4 chances to get hits with the AMRAAMs, and on high ECM planes they can be a bit inconsistent. So still very, very solid, especially if you have to deal with bombers mostly or something, or low ECM planes. Can sometimes, the thing is, stuff like KWS and yeah, going for ones with the short range missiles as well, especially if fly head on with an enemy plane, they are just more consistent. Not a good bomber, don't even bother. All the Aryan bombers are just bad. Peace Pheasant, very solid. You get 2 of those on Harden, so the accuracy isn't really too bad. You get 4 of these missiles. You get also 2 cards of this plane, by the way. You get 4 missiles on Harden, that's decent accuracy, and they rearm pretty quickly because they're low-end Mavericks. It is very solid. Kind of easy to kill, since only lowish ACM, and they will generally dive pretty deep into the enemy AA net. However, 4 missiles obviously means that not only is it decent against super heavies, but even more so against medium tanks. So it's not like a 27M or a Syria, where they are either very expensive to use against stuff like medium tanks, or just can only take out one at once. But the Peace Pheasant is both deadly against medium tanks as well as super heavies, so it's also very versatile. And also just very good at sniping AA thanks to its speed. So very versatile anti-vehicle plane, that you don't even mind buying against, just for stuff like Martyr 2s, if you can keep it alive, of course. If it's questionable whether it will survive a run, it's probably not worth buying against Martyr 2s outside of very niche scenarios. Not a great ASF either. This is also a bad bomber. I tried using it as like a supporting ASF, but you're just better off using KF-16C, Peace Pheasants, and this one, which we'll come to in a bit. No, it's just bad. Another Hilo Hunter, but it has less ECM. It does have a bit more accuracy, but it doesn't have a Vulcan either, which is actually quite a big deal, making it not that great. And you don't on 6 missiles. It's just you don't need that many. Also horrible. It's a rocket pop lane. It's fine, but it's also slow, slow-ish, with no ECM as well. So it's not really great. Arguably, the best seed lane in the game. I guess if you want pure seed, you might say the Raven is better or something, but you get 2 of these downwetted if you want them, for team games or something, and 1 upwet on elite means it's very accurate on this. On elite at long range, it's basically like a F15C, right? 50% ECM, elite aim 120s, very accurate. And you get 2 seed missiles. Obviously it isn't as consistent at closer ranges. If you don't hit with enough of these M120s, it's hard to obviously kill something. And like the KF16C, you can't use it as like a emergency anti-helo plane, but still just very good. And in 1 versus 1, if you get into a place where it's worth buying this, and you can't keep getting value out of this, your opponent might have a very hard time depending on what deck they play. Like Dutch German with no, outside of the Eotalk, which is just with no proper non-radar AA, this unit can be incredibly annoying to deal with. And the stuff obviously means that it's hard to detect, and the stealth is obviously also useful for ASF purposes, because if you keep it circling like somewhere behind the lines, the opponent might not even know that it's circling there, send out a bomber, and then be caught off guard by the Block 52 being able to shoot it down before it even drops the bombs. So yeah. So that's the units, that's the deck. So I was talking about it being like I wouldn't like some sort of weakness. And the thing is, the infantry itself, if you ignore the transports again, isn't really outstanding by any means. But the thing is with Blue Dragons is they make out their mediocre, I guess, infantry, I guess I should clarify. With infantry, I mean like they're infantry that can fight other infantry. Chumat are amazing infantry, but with infantry quality right now, I'm talking about infantry fighting other infantry, like rifle infantry, right? And the quality of that isn't really great, but they make that up with amazing fire support, WAPCs, KAFVs, HQ Shikis, great 5-pointers, Cobras, M36s, K1s even, M41s, they have great fire support, and that's the flavor of them. They are weak in the infantry department itself, but they have the great transport and the great fire support, giving them like that tool to make up for their weakness. And that's how coalitions should be, how their flavor should be, not like Baltic or Entente that have great infantry and great fire support, stuff like that is just stupid. And then they're not really having any tank at the high price range that's actually tanky. The Kiyomaru is not very tanky for its price, neither is the K1A1. However, the K1, for example, for 90 points is very tanky, stuff like that. That's how it should be. That the ASFs are just very anti-plane focused, but they're bad at close range. Either you have long range ASFs or you have close range ASFs, but you don't have anything that can kind of be both, like a KWS, like an F16C, Block 52, stuff like that. So it's really nice, and the deck is still very strong. It's not top tier, but it's still very strong and very playable by any means, right? So that's how coalitions ideally should be. So yeah, that's Blue Dragons. Here's my team deck that I'm currently running, I think. I haven't really changed it in a while. There's not really too much you can do wrong. I was saying that this isn't the best combination, but I guess I just want a lot of them and cheap. This is my 1 versus 1 deck. I played just recently versus Nick, so this is probably just more up to date. And yeah, next up is probably gonna be Eurocore. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll hopefully see you next time.